Big swell came in after I was there for like a week, and it was just so on. And I just remember sitting at Money Trees and looking up the point, and there's another little section of Money Trees that does like a little bit of a pipeline impression. And I remember looking at these perfect barrels going, why is no one sitting up there? Mm-hmm. And I was just like, am I going to go? Like freaking out. I was like shaking, and I was on my Pavel 510 fish, and I paddled up to the next peak, and no one was there. And I just like remembered where the wave came in and used my seaside knowledge to like triangulate some boils and did my best. And like my first wave was just perfect. I got a stand-up barrel. I was like, oh my gosh. And then my next wave, I ate shit on the drop and got slammed on the reef. But I was like, wow, this is like what it's all about, really. And I think from that point on, I just really wanted to push myself and really wanted to push my board design to, ride those sort of waves.
Are you ready, boys? Start swimming.
That's Ryan Burch. I'm Jamie Brisick. This is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from FCS, Finesse, Howler Brothers, Outerknown, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, the Journal delivers 136 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more and to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses. If you're anything like me and you spend lots of time around the water, then you know just how important it is to have a good pair of shades. And since 1983, when a group of intrepid outdoorsmen set out to make sunglasses that could stand up to the harsh environments they regularly encountered, Costa remains the choice in eyewear among those committed to life on the water. So whether you're diving in, climbing a board, suiting up, sliding one, leaning back, or all the above, head to costadelmar.com to grab your pair and to see what's out there. Hailing from Encinitas, California, Ryan Burch is a goofyfoot, a shaper, a husband, a new father, a free surfer, and a free thinker. His approach to wave riding might be described as experimental, both in the lines he draws and the surfcraft that he rides, everything from asyms to gliders to old-school twin-keeled fishes to sawed-off chunks of raw foam. I first became aware of him via the latter. In an Instagram clip, he stood on what looked like a bar of soap, slipping and sliding and spinning around the pocket. Tall, thin, rubbery, playful, he made surfing look absurdly fun. Quote, "He is the first truly postmodern surfer, a talent that combines every generation of surfing that's come before him, often on a single wave," said Stab Magazine's Jed Smith in 2015. Ryan shaped his first board at age 20, loved it, shaped more, and soon became a leading figure in the backyard DIY board building scene. He's appeared in a number of surf films, among them 2010's Stoked and Broke and 2019's Self-Discovery for Social Survival. His part in 2015's Psychic Migrations earned him a Best Performance nomination in the Surfer Poll Awards. We spoke at his newly purchased home out in Vista, just inland from Oceanside. The place is a fixer-upper, and Ryan seemed fired up about doing the renovation himself. Chickens bopped around the backyard. The door to his on-site shaping room was ajar, and I could feel him itching to get in there. So Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
What is firing you up right now in the shaping room? What boards are you making that you're excited about?
Really just evolving the asym designs that I've been playing with for a while now. I've just been, on this road of refinement with them and just, nitpicking the heck out of little things like rocker and volume flow and the flow of the contours and just, really tightening up the shape of it.
Tell me about the asyms, because I know you've been making them for a while, and I've actually tried your asyms, and they're such an odd design compared to what we see so much of? What's the kind of logic or philosophy behind them?
Yeah, I was riding shortboards as a young kid and competing in like the local scholastic contests, the NSSA and all that. And, I had this like sort of upbringing on this high performance thruster that is so highly evolved and fine tuned that the asyms kind of my approach at getting back to that, having gone down the road of like experimenting with fishes and more like wide planing plan shapes, and then realizing that I never wanted to lose the effortless speed that a fish had, but needing to build more control into a board. And one of the best ways without any sort of compromise was to go with an asymmetric shape, because you can really fine tune each side and push the speed element all the way to its fullest potential without thinking about the other side. You kind of just shape around the thing in a circle. So it became very like apparent that it was going to be an easy way for me to like really make myself something that was super custom and really adapt to my surfing.
Yep. But so just so I understand clearly, I'm a regular foot. If I were to order a board, would the fact that I'm a regular foot change the side that you would make the kind of, like, isn't the idea that your toe side has more length and then your heel side has less? Is that?
Yeah, it's set up for your stance. So for a regular footer, it'd just be flipped.
Yeah.
So the opposite. But, it's one of those things where people try them. Sometimes I get customers who are like, I picked up this board. It's awesome. I love it. And it's shaped for a goofy footer and they're a regular footer.
Right.
You know, and I've even seen Carl Ekstrom, who's one of my mentors and one of the first people to do asymmetric shapes. I've seen him set out to shape one for someone who was kind of requesting it backwards, in our opinion. So it's just kind of really that either side isn't intended to be the same as the other one.
Surfboards can be mysterious that way.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people ride asyms and they don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. What about, how did you find your way to shaping?
I found my way to shaping when I was out of high school, and I was going down the road of maybe thinking about competing in the WQS contest and like stepping up from that sort of amateur contest circuit into this more like traveling pro circuit sort of scenario. But I didn't have a lot of support from my sponsors and was kind of like not killing it. I wasn't climbing the ranks super quickly. So I was stuck here out of high school and totally in love with surfing, with all my time to dedicate to surfing. And I found myself, in Cardiff and Encinitas, where it's A+ longboarding 95% of the time. And I kind of came to this realization, like, just to stay in the water every day, I'm going to start riding a longboard. And it like just captivated me. Like, it's all I wanted to do was to ride a longboard, because we had these really good waves and the learning curve was really fast. Whereas on my thruster, 90% of the time I'd paddle out there and there was like a cap on the performance and a cap on my progression due to the like gutless, weak little surf that we have all the time. So I got psyched on longboarding. I had a stand-up paddle board. I was like paddling that to stay in shape and riding that, and like, whoa, you can, just like really captivated by glide, I think, and the momentum that a bigger board picks up. And I was riding for Greg Sarich, who's a shaper from Encinitas, who's done tons and tons of boards. And I approached him like, hey, will you make me like this Takayama in the pink? I wanted him to copy. And he was like, oh, hell no. Like, I don't shape longboards. He was kind of crusty about it. And that kind of led me to thinking like, oh, maybe I should reach out to a friend of mine who was a longboarder and really good surfer and board building and doing all this stuff, like deep diving into the world of creating his own boards. Chris Cravey. I had surfed with his brother a lot growing up, and he's like an excellent longboarder and was riding Tudor boards. And I just asked Chris if he would help me shape a longboard, and he was pretty generous with his time and let me use his little backyard shaping bay and Encinitas, and that was kind of where I got my start at shaping. And I fell in love with the process. Like, I finished the board and I was kind of like already thinking about the next one, because I was just like so stoked on that I can spend some of my time doing that, making a board.
Yep. It's so interesting. I have a lot of friends who have taken up shaping, not in any commercial way, but they just do it purely out of passion. And it does seem like it has this really addictive thing where if you have an affinity for it and you get in there and you like sort of doing the rails and watching the rocker and looking at it under the symmetrical lights and all that stuff, it really, it's like this, it can become very obsessive.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's very much so obsessive, and it's just a way to really bridge the gaps between surf sessions too. Like, that's what it was for me, just having that mindset of surfing when you're not surfing and you're doing something that's creative.
Yep. I remember being with you in Encinitas a while ago, and you had the rear of your van open, and you'd built a lot of the shelving, and I realized you clearly were skilled with your hands. Were you skilled with your hands before you started shaping? Like when you made that first longboard, were you already doing woodworking, or did that come after shaping?
A little bit, yeah. I had a rudimentary sense of what to do with a tool. My dad got me a jigsaw when I was maybe 14, and I started building ramps for my mini tech deck skateboards. And that was kind of like the first thing. I was measuring and getting dimensions and eyeballing curve and kind of like figuring out what felt the best underneath my fingers on the tech deck. And I started making these pretty elaborate tech deck ramps. And I've always had the interest in building things, and was a little bit reluctant to pick up the shaping tools because I would hang out in Greg Sarch's garage and just listen to his banter about other shapers, and that really seemed like there was this right and wrong way to go about it. And when I finally did start shaping, it was kind of like this heavy thing that I was getting into, and I wanted to do it right and really learn how to use the planer. And it wouldn't be that way if it wasn't for listening to Greg all those years, just, ranting and raving about this and that and the shaping process. But I've always had, that creative knack. And I took a lot of art classes in high school too. And kind of seemed like, the creativity and the artistic approach all came together when I started shaping.
Yep.
I no longer felt the urge to put paint to canvas anymore. I was kind of like getting all that artistic expression out in the shaping room.
No, that's really beautiful. I mean, I always think of the film Morning of the Earth, which was a real big one for me. And there's this scene where, somewhere up near Byron Bay, there's the shaping, and then there's the cutting. There's a particular scene where it cuts back and forth between close-ups on the hand mowing the foam and making the rails, and then out in the water riding the board. And there's something so beautiful about the idea of being a good surfer and making your own equipment and having that kind of reciprocal thing of being able to ride it, go, make mental notes of sort of how the thing's working, and then go into the shaping room and make changes accordingly on the next board.
Yeah, I think the ocean teaches us so many lessons, and, just makes us seize the moment. And I don't know, all these different things that, when you start shaping or you start building surfboards, you're kind of receptive of the same sort of feedback from the craft that you're doing as you are with riding a wave. You're drawing a line and going, oh yeah, that works. And there's this love affair with that, lessons being taught to you by the ocean or the thing that you're creating. And I feel like a lot of the people who I've connected with in the board building industry are, people who I think their love affair for the ocean is being running through their craftsmanship, the way they lay down an edge on a hot coat, or the way you take a pass off the planer is this dance that's very closely related to surfing and, in response of these feelings that you get from the ocean.
No, you're so right. It's really interesting. I've often thought of, if you were going to do a sort of portrait of a shaper in the shaping room, so often we focus on the hands, but I've watched shapers almost cross-stepping as they're moving up and down the blank on the stand, and it very is like a dance.
Yeah, definitely.
What was your upbringing like? Tell me where you grew up and sort of when you found surfing and what that was like.
I grew up in Encinitas, and between Encinitas and Carlsbad, so North County, San Diego. And I got into surfing because my dad was a surfer and my brother was a surfer and my dad's dad was a surfer. So I'm third generation California surfer, and my dad got me into it a little early. He was like all gung-ho, so tried to push me into waves when I was 3 years old and scared me away from it. And then I started riding a boogie board in the summers, and I think I really surfed throughout the winter by the time I was 11. And yeah, I just grew up around the ocean, so it was kind of this natural progression for me to start to surf. And yeah.
I know that you competed when you were younger. Was there a point where did you ever want to be a pro surfer in the more conventional sense of like, being on the world tour?
Yeah, definitely. I chased that dream as a young amateur, and then it just kind of becomes apparent when you're not making a lot of heats or whatever. It's the contest gives you, kind of a ranking. And once you're in the 30, 40 or 50th ranking, you're kind of looking at it going, okay, I'm probably not going to win a world title. So
yep.
Maybe I should I don't know. I never really thought of like riding different stuff as a pivot in order to get attention. Mm-hmm. It was a pivot to keep myself happy in the ocean.
Yep.
Because this competitive thing can kind of drive you to, not loving what you're doing.
Absolutely. I first became aware of you when you were riding a seemingly square kind of mat with no fin, like almost what in my generation was called a boogie board. Mm-hmm. You know the one I'm talking about? It's like it's like a bar of soap, basically.
Yeah, just a piece of foam.
Yes. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I was watching some of these clips before I came to talk to you today, and I was looking at it going, he looks like he's just having so much fun. And also getting those incredible feelings, which having played with sort of free friction finless boards in my time, there's that it's like when you're driving and you go over a hump and you get your heart in your throat kind of thing. It's just the best feeling. But tell me how you found your way to those boards.
Well, while I was experimenting with longboarding and falling back in love with the area that I grew up, I was also body surfing a lot. And mm-hmm. I had these little chunks of wood that I would just use as like a belly board. They're about the size of a kickboard. And that was kind of the first thing I shaped for the ocean, was I was shaping concaves into pieces of plywood to see if it changed the performance of them at all. Mm-hmm. And that was a, finless, because it's like a pipo, like a little bodyboard. And I remember kind of going like, oh, if I make it a little longer, I can kind of plane up on it now, and I can put my elbows on it and steer it like a bodyboard. And I felt like I was on this track to making them longer and longer and longer. And then all of a sudden someone's like, hey, that's like what Rob was standing up on. And Machado had gotten an Alaya from Tom Wegner. And mm-hmm. here he was standing up on the piece of wood. And I just instantly clicked. I was a little bit pissed off, almost like, man, I was like on the track to figuring out that you could surf a piece of wood by myself. Uh-huh. But now Machado has one, and he's riding one with style and grace, and it looks like he's having the best time. So I got into making Alayas. Okay. And that was kind of my intro to finless surfing. And after that, I just spent a lot of time whittling those, and that was kind of, I would go to Home Depot and buy Douglas fir, the cheapest wood I could find, and glue them up and shape boards. And mm-hmm. they would fall apart pretty quickly because they get waterlogged, and it's real grainy wood, and they just break down the center, or, in some odd formation around the knots, not mm-hmm. typically at the glue joints. But that was what I was getting up to. I was longboarding when it was small, and then when it was a little bigger, I'd ride an Alaya. And yeah, I guess the foam finless board phase came from experimenting with a couple of glassed finless boards. Mm-hmm. After seeing Derek Hind at the same time he was doing his stuff at J-Bay, and I was hanging around the Derby House a lot in Encinitas, and Jack McCoy is a good friend of Garth's, and he came to stay, and Derek came with him. And so I got this firsthand experience with Derek, and he was on these finless boards, and I started riding glass finless boards, and I had cut an outline out at my house out of Arcel foam, which is I was getting from INT, which is a soft top company that's based out of Carlsbad. They had ordered blanks without their internal stringers, and they were rejects because they were creating these soft boards that were like big pool noodles. So they had this back stock of reject blanks without stringers, and I was able to get my hands on probably like 15 of those over the course of a couple years. And the first one I had cut an outline at my house and was going to take it over to where I was shaping at the time at Jake Moss's shaping bay in Solana Beach. And I passed by Seaside, and there was like these little runners on the inside, and I went out, and Ronnie Philippi, who's a local surfer who's always hanging in the parking lot at Seaside, was like, hey, you can surf those without glass. And I was like, no way. He's like, try it. And I was like, all right, let's try that out. And went out and rode a couple waves, and it was like pretty instant that it worked really well like that. So there's no reason for me to go overcomplicating it by shaping it and busting out the glass and trying to seal this thing up. It worked just fine. And I think that afternoon I took the blank that I rode and another blank down to my friends in La Jolla, and Lucas Dirksey and his mom had this cool little place down there, like right by Winnansea, and
I've been there. Yeah,
we were hanging out with Richard Kenvin at the time too, and he was filming us just kind of goofing around in the shore break. And I took the blank down there, and we hacked one up for him, and we went and rode him in the shore break, and the rest was just kind of like the rest is history, with just being so psyched on how functional it was and just the beauty of the simplicity. I think a lot of times in surfing, we're just drawn towards this simple sort of stuff. And that was one of the simplest things that I've ever done as far as shaping and surfing goes.
Right. Yeah. It's just observing, it seems you've been really experimental and kind of just riding everything and riding, whatever board sort of suit the conditions.
Yeah. You're always trying to get the right board for the right conditions. And yeah, I've been lucky to grow up in an area that kind of forces you to think outside the box, and there's so many examples of what does work here, and the waves are very forgiving, so you can get away with it. At a certain point, experimenting gets kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
And I learned that once I had the means to travel a lot more. It was kind of like, okay, now it's, you got to evolve mentally to experiment in places like Hawaii and Indo and stuff like that. It's different sort of scenario.
Because the waves are more serious and the stakes are higher.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I agree with you. And having lived down in this area, sort of North County, and surfing around Encinitas, etc., the waves are really soft, but they're also really consistent and really shapely and fun. And it seems like there's just a kind of bursting surf scene here.
Yeah, for sure.
So thinking about sort of not going down the path of competition and then going into being a professional quote unquote free surfer, being able to sort of explore, being able to play maybe a little bit more. Do you ever wish you competed, or are you really happy taking the path that you have?
I'm really happy taking the path I have.
Yeah.
I just feel like I got turned on to all these new things at a time that was really right for that to happen to me, because I don't know, who knows where I'd be had I went down the competitive route. I don't think I have the skills to have ever been on the world tour, really. I look at how well those guys are surfing and how technical it is, and I don't think I ever would have got there. So I feel like, I got the dream job. I kind of just got to explore all these different surfboard designs and surf all sorts of different waves on a company's dime, because I was getting shots, having fun. Yep.
When you think about your travels thus far in your life, what have been the highlights? What have been some of the great surf trips that you've been on?
It's been a long road to getting comfortable in heavier and hollower surf for me. I grew up here, and the waves aren't that heavy. And so it was pretty shocking when I first started to travel. You know, you go to Hawaii as a young kid and I would just be like, these guys are crazy. I can't believe there's this many crazy people on one island.
Yeah.
And just shocked. And so I think some of the most memorable surf trips for me were just stints I spent in Indonesia. G-Land was kind of the mecca for me. This was probably fast forward 2 or 3 years from me riding the foam block a lot and all that. I started getting some shots in magazines, and Volcom all of a sudden was like, okay, it's worth us giving you a salary to go surfing. And I took that salary and made myself a quiver geared towards heavier waves and geared towards barrel riding. And I went to Indonesia with that in like 2012. And I spent a month in Indo, and 28 days of that month I was at G-Land. I surfed Ulus for like 4 days and then figured out a way to get over to G-Land and didn't leave until I had to catch a flight home. And it was an insane learning curve for me.
Wow. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I just got to this place that was, I really liked going forehand because I was making these asym boards that were kind of, you know, touchy, and it was all such a new experience. My body just worked good going left, and I spent a lot of my younger years going on surf trips like wherever the crew was going to go, and I went to Mexico a lot down to the right point breaks and did all these trips to rights, it seemed like. So G-Land was my like sight set on surfing a left-hand barrel. And I showed up at G-Land with a Pavel 510 keelfin fish, and then like a handful of asyms that I'd shaped myself and glassed myself, and some lockbox fins that I had made myself, and like everything was made by me start to finish on these boards. And I remember riding Ulus for the first time and just noticing how different the water felt, like warm water versus kind of our syrupy water here in California. And I noticed that on my fins, they felt really squirrely, but it could have been the jet lag too, and all these new feelings that I was getting from traveling halfway around the world to surf really powerful waves. And my equipment was like failing me big time. I was breaking fins out like every session at Ulus, and kind of tripping out, thinking that I was not going to have much success over there. And I just gave it some time and was patient with it. And I had a friend, Eric Snordham, who had traveled to Indo a couple times before me, and he was kind of telling me like, you know, you think you're going to go over there and get the barrel of your life right away, but it takes time, and it takes like, you know, some sacrifice. It's not as easy as you think. So his words of wisdom were playing in my head while I, you know, got the nerve to start going on some sets at G-Land. And then big swell came in after I was there for like a week, and it was just so on. And I just remember sitting at Money Trees and looking up the point, and there's another little section of Money Trees that does like a little bit of a pipeline impression. And I remember looking at these perfect barrels going, why is no one sitting up there? And I was just like, am I going to go? You know, like freaking out. I was like shaking, and I was on my Pavel 510 fish, and I paddled up to the next peak, and no one was there. And I just like remembered where the wave came in and used my seaside knowledge to like triangulate some boils and did my best. And like my first wave was just perfect. I got a stand-up barrel. I was like, oh my gosh. And then my next wave, I ate shit on the drop and got slammed on the reef. But I was like, wow, this is like what it's all about, really. And I think from that point on, I just really wanted to push myself and really wanted to push my board design to, you know, ride those sort of waves.
How big was it at G-Land, this particular session you're referring to?
Triple overhead.
Yeah.
Yeah, solid.
And what was it like to sort of be flying across one of those waves? I've never surfed G-Land.
G-Land's amazing because it has so many different sections that you can spend a lot of time there, and you can really learn like the circumstances that best suit you. And I think that was a valuable lesson for me just in my career as a free surfer too, is just learning what waves complemented my skill set.
Yep.
And I stood by that pretty strictly when I first started, you know, shooting video and stuff like that. And I feel like it served me really well, just knowing what suited me.
Yep. When you were surfing these waves, I would imagine on the one hand, you're you're sort of having this like fast track of education as a surfer, but then there's also this kind of checking in with the board under your feet and thinking about how that's working in those conditions, and you're making sort of notes that you'll take to the shaping room later.
Yeah. I surfed like I was listening to what was happening underneath my feet.
Yeah.
I didn't surf like I was dead set on my performance and focusing on, how radically I can push my body. I just kind of rode along the wave. And,
Yeah.
it's apparent in videos of me surfing those sort of waves. I was kind of just, like flirting with the speed and the power of it and just kind of like staying in the sweet spot and flicking my board around. I was never like, whipping into some turn that was so radical you couldn't believe I recovered. I just kind of was like S-ing down the wave and ducking into the tube when it presented itself and just running the line, really.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that, because I think a lot of people, and you have many fans, I'm sure you know this, but they really like seeing that in you. I mean, I think we see such a glut of like the world tour events and everyone just, with this grit, and you can just feel this intensity of wanting to do these big, huge moves. And I think when you see someone who's really, really skilled, but that is not sort of trying to like make everything huge and has more finesse and flow, you being a great example, Machado would be a great example. It really connects in some way.
Yeah, it's relatable.
Yeah. Thinking about this period where you have Volcom sort of backing you, you're making videos, you're going to some of the world's best waves. Were you, because there wasn't contest involved and there wasn't like a ranking next to your name, did you feel the pressure on you? Did it feel like I'm just going to have fun with all this and sort of apply this to my shaping? Or did you feel like I got to prove my worth to keep the sponsorship going?
Later on down the road, the pressure started to creep, and I started to lose my clear mindset as to, what was my niche, and what I started to have a bit of imposter syndrome, thinking that I'm as good as these gnarly guys with grit, but in no way was I.
Uh-huh.
So that kind of led me astray a little bit. And, there was a time when Volcom reached out to me and was like, anywhere you want to go, we're going to back you, and we're going to send a film crew, and we're making a big movie. And that was kind of the first time I felt the pressure. Mm-hmm. And that trip I was able to overcome the pressure. And that was that part that was filmed in South America on the Rainbow Board that a lot of people have come to recognize me for. Yeah. And I remember being on that trip, and I went 2 weeks early to connect with the people who I'd already known down there. I had been on trips there before, and I wanted to build some surfboards, and I wanted to get used to the waves because I knew that's what's going to suit me the best for when I actually get to film. And I spent 2 weeks there surfing by myself and pushing myself, and I was in this, I started to click into that mindset. It takes a little while coming from California to really be, ready to charge and ready to push it. And by the time the crew got there, I was in this creative flow state, and I knew what was going on. And then the crew just arrives, and they just went through this long travel, and they're under all this stress, and they're telling me that they spent way more than their budget because the rental cars were $6,000, and all this starts to get laid on me here, the decision maker, the shot caller. And I immediately tripped out, and my first instinct was to bail. Get on a bus, get on a plane, and get the hell out of there. And, that's a lame way to do things. So I didn't do that. That would have been, I really would have regretted that forever. And luckily, the ocean cooperated with us on that one. It would have probably changed my whole career had the ocean went, no, you're going to get the typical for down here, which is windy, bumpy, unruly surf. And that time, it just got better and better and better, and the crew had a rhythm. We knew where we were going, and we kept going there, and the waves were better every day. And so it was able to happen. The magic unfolded like that.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, it sure is.
Do you, being sort of being a quote unquote surf star, does that feel comfortable to you, or is it something that's not, how does that feel?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult at times. I definitely tripped out on being recognized, and I'm a pretty shy person. And I think that drinking beer and hanging out with everyone definitely helped me shoot the shit and do small talk and accept my role of being kind of a promoter of this youthful, fun brand, partying's definitely a part of the job. And I definitely embraced that for, a period of time, and then realized that it kind of wasn't the route for me. Yeah, so now just growing up is just being wise. I haven't had a beer in like 2 years, so it's just one of those things that you got to put down at a certain point and realize what it's taking away. And, I read Tom Morey's book, Morning Glass, and that was kind of my first sit down and read something with insight from an older surfer.
Yeah.
Someone who was recognized for surfing, celebrated for surfing, who saw that through and then was, currently still fulfilling himself in the ocean.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, oh, there's going to be a life after this.
Yeah.
This whole like surf stardom thing where, I'm going to need to have some of myself left for that,
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to need to grow up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm currently going through that right now.
Yeah. What about, who have been your mentors and heroes? I know you mentioned one earlier, but in terms of both surfing and shaping, who are the folks? You mentioned Carl Ekstrom. Who's been important in your life?
Yeah, Ekstrom's a huge influence on just my thought process going into building a surfboard. He's just an out-of-the-box thinker, and he's super productive too. He's a huge influence in that. When I think of him often here at my new house doing yard work, he fills up 3 of those greenway spins every week. He's like brags about how long it's been since he's missed that window to have 3 full yardway spins out. And so he's just like a really productive guy and a really proficient worker. And, also he's a genius and a very kind, awesome person. Another big influence was at G-Land, I met a guy by the name of Michael Narchi. And Narchi was riding fishes that he made, these steveless template, kind of futuristic bottom-shaped foiled fishes. And he had all different widths, and he was this like long hair cruisy surfer from LA, and he was like so tapped into Indo. He had been spending off seasons at the jungle with the crew at G-Land, like just hanging out there for the odd time when it did turn offshore when it wasn't supposed to, and like had really put his time in over there. So he was kind of like, he was riding, what I was interested in riding and devoting so much time to it. And just getting to spend time with him and watch his approach out at G-Land was huge for me at a time when I was, looking to step it up and looking to have an influence outside like a California surf star.
Yeah.
He was really, living the dream, in my opinion. And he talked a lot about creating a shaping bay at G-Land and, had an eye on this progression of an alternative looking board. And it allowed him to ride that wave better than anyone that I saw, or more relatable. He was taking super high lines because G-Land will kind of pinch or get real almondy. So it's a barrel that you really have to surf. And he was the one who drilled that into my mind, is that you got to be able to climb the face, and you got to be able to cling to the face of the wave when it's beyond vertical. And that was definitely like a driving force for me leaving that first year and planning on going back. So he was a huge influence. Obviously, riding for Volcom, you get to go on trips with so many amazing surfers. And so a lot of their rosters had a big impact on, my realization of what good surfing is.
Yeah.
And definitely Bryce Young is a huge influence on my surfing, and was like sort of a sparring partner / brother of mine, and still is one of my closest friends. He's just a really talented, really driven person, and comes from, obviously the Young lineage. And getting to meet him, I met him in Indonesia in, I don't know what year it was, I think 2014. And he invited me to their family home in Angary, and I got to, meet Nat and hang out with his whole family. Ty and his sister Nava just had her first baby with Taylor Jensen, and it was just this strong family unit who was living by the surf forecast, or living by the waves day to day. They were just all about surfing. And, Nat was in his 70s at this point, and it was pretty awesome to see his dedication to the point there at Angary and surfing and his performance too, You get pissed off when he was bogging still, and he's 72 years old, so it was a pretty eye-opening thing to witness.
Yeah.
And Nat is a huge influence to me, and just seeing the way he lives his life and what he makes important definitely was one of the first examples of, like how I should shift my focus at a very important time to like have these examples, even though I didn't like totally know how important they were going to become at the time.
Yep. When you say shift your focus, I would imagine at this time you were already shaping, you were already surfing a ton and sponsored by Volcom and traveling all over. So what specifically do you mean by shifting your focus?
Just shifting my focus from like trying to be a celebrated surfer to trying to live a good life that revolves around surfing.
Yep.
It can kind of become your driving force when you're paid to like create banger parts. You're like, you're always wanting to have the next blow up. So this was at a time when I was still like very convinced that I had a long way to go with my ability and what I could showcase in the water and my shaping too. But that was kind of my first deep dive into refining the asyms was the year that I met Bryce in Indo. I had made myself like 70 boards, but I made 40 of them and hung them on the wall at a little space down in Encinitas and told everyone I was going to go travel the world and try them all out. None of them were for sale, but everyone should come look at them. And I'll have free beer for anyone who wanted to come.
Great.
It was awesome. It was still like in board building. It's probably the single most important thing I've done. It was at a time when it cost me about $125 to build a surfboard.
Wow.
Maybe a little bit more, but it wasn't that much. So my monthly salary could float like 20 boards or whatever. And it took me, I think, 6 weeks to build all these boards start to finish.
No kidding. That's fast.
I clicked into the flow state. It was my intro to production. You hear of these prolific production hand shapers who shape 12 boards a day by hand, or like, there's just these crazy numbers that get thrown out there. And I was infatuated with that. I was like, how in the world? Because you shape your first couple boards and it takes you 3-4 days, And so to get to a point where like the motions are second nature was something that seemed super attractive to me. And I just wanted to get super good with the planer, and I wanted a huge freaking quiver of these things, I was seeing photos of the garages in Hawaii with like Andy Iron's quiver, and you're like 6 of these size, 6 of this size, 6 of this size, and 2 of all those all the way up to 7.2 or whatever. And that was like, that's a high performance quiver in my mind. And so the statement I wanted to make was that these are my high performance boards. So I'm going to rack up a freaking rack of these things that looks comparable to what you see from the top-notch pros. And I was able to do that, and it was pretty awesome. I got to hit the road with 12 of them, and then I met Bryce in Indo, and then was down to like 4 by the time I left his house because the airline was so strict on weight. I had to like cancel a flight and go back and dump another one off. But that was a huge learning curve. And by the end of making those 40 boards for myself, my first thought was I should sell all these and then I'll have enough money to make myself 80.
Wow.
And I'll make them really good because I know how to make them now.
Yeah. No, you're getting to my next question, which is, what'd you learn from this like concentrated shaping bout? Like what was the upshot of all that?
Just learning the process and being able to reevaluate your process and trim the fat, you know?
Yeah.
When you're trying to do 6 boards in a day, you're not stopping with the planer way ahead of time and busting out your smaller tool. You just go as far as you can possibly push it. And when you have that many shots at it, you're not afraid to go a little too far too. So, sometimes with shaping, I've learned that things that you think are mistakes end up being really advantageous. Like when you're hand shaping and you're trying to finish a board really quickly, I found that foiling the tips almost to an unreasonable like fine finish will save you a lot of time, because you will come back in with a sanding block and it takes you 50 times to sand down what would have took you one pass with a planer.
I see.
So it got me really quick with that. And then all the way through the process, because I was glassing them too. And, just cutting cloth. If you have to lay up 12 sides in a day, you just get really fast at moving around the board, pull the cloth out, wetting it out, everything with the lamination onto the hot coating. And you start realizing where your setbacks are in the sanding room. And then when you go back to, start to glass another batch of them, you don't make that mistake again. And so it just cuts out all that kind of rookie mistakes.
Yep. Total efficiency with your time.
And also, like, being able to do it for yourself, you're not as stressed.
Yeah.
It always seems like people who are production glassers or whatever, they had a boss who drilled it into their head or whatever, that they can't do that. But it was myself being responsible for my own screw ups.
Yeah. With shaping, is it something where are you aspiring to sort of have it be a big business, a big earn you money, or is it more a love and you're more into it for just design and experimentation?
Yeah, that's a question that I'm asking myself a lot right now. Currently, that's what makes an income for me and my whole family. My wife helps me with the emails and communicating with the customers, and I do the shaping, and the prices of my boards are pretty steep now for, a shortboard. I never would have imagined walking into a surf shop and spending $2,000 on a small shortboard.
Yep.
But it's the demand and the expertise that have gotten me to that point to be able to sell boards for that. And it really is an honor to me. And I take it pretty seriously. I try to do my best on every board, and I really finish them nice. And I work with the best glassing team and just try to make them something that when someone gets it, they want to take care of it and hang on to it for a long time.
Yeah.
And they kind of often come with me for requests for boards for their like dream scenario, and that's like a super big honor to be building someone a board for, something they dream of doing and achieving. And yeah, it's been awesome to make so many boards and have so many people trust me to do what I want to do. I really get to be creative and make what's exciting to me. I'm not pigeonholed by models and stuff. And so that's definitely a driving force to stay away from the big business side of things.
Yeah.
But I do often like watch the WSL contests and stuff and listen to like the big name shapers just kind of like mingling and just there to watch and there to learn about what's going. And I get envious of their position, having made so many boards for so many top athletes, to kind of just be like an advisor. And I definitely don't think I'm a very good boss, so I don't see running like a production crew at the moment, but I think I have a clear vision of what it would take to make like an awesome product. But right now my boards are still very like art driven. Like I'm hand drawing on all of them, and they're, just more of a artistic expression, I'd say.
Yep. No, it's really interesting what you just said about, recently we just had the Margaret River WSL event and World Tour event, and there was Britt Merrick, I think Peisel was there, Darren Hanley was there. And I'm thinking these guys have these huge, surfboard brands and so many boards out in the world, and yet they're maintaining this focus and this love of like watching very, very closely. And it's kind of good to see that those two things aren't in conflict with one another, that you can actually be big and successful, but you can have the time to have that sort of nerding out love for the thing.
Yeah, with the right process in place, makes sense.
Yep. On the note of Margaret River, we recently had this final day, and it was interesting because in my opinion, we got to see sort of carving in a way that we haven't seen in a while. And John in particular doing these sort of, beyond vertical rail cars, kind of putting the outside rail in places that you normally wouldn't. Did you get to watch that?
Yeah. Recently I've been watching a lot of the contests because often I'll have the baby and I'll just be like hanging out with him. So it's a really good way to pass time. So I've been like fanatical. Like as soon as the email comes in, I'm like on the contest right away.
Yeah.
which is a change from last like 8 years or something. I'll only watch like pipe and chopu.
Yep. What excites you when you're watching it? What surfers, what moves, what part of...
I mean, everyone loves that carve that John's doing, and it's rad to see Jack have his variation of it.
Yes,
and
for sure.
kind of match fire with fire. That was an awesome final showing. Yeah. And the heat before, where John was just surfing in that flow state and getting those awesome waves, that was just insane.
Yeah.
And it baffles me too, because that board he rides trips me out. You know, it's kind of the opposite of what I've been trying to push my boards to, with the narrow tail and the real, just so many thrustery, gnarly features on that thing. It just trips me out that he's able to maintain that much speed on that narrow of a tail on a thruster shape. But it's, you know, a testament to Paizel's designing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And their relationship too. And that's super inspiring for me to see. Like, I just love that they have had this long history of working together, and he really hasn't strayed from that. He's just stuck with what works, and to see it pay off like that, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you. Well,
really cool.
The thing that's interesting with shaping is when I was younger, I was so, you know, enamored of surfing and so into surfing, and I was a competitive surfer, and I was so obsessed, and I failed to recognize that there would come a time when most likely, unless I put a lot of energy into it, my sort of skill level in the water was in diminishing returns. You know, I probably wasn't going to get any better. And the thing that's interesting looking at you, having shaping and surfing as almost these sort of this holistic practice, that the shaping can keep expanding. You know, you could be 60 years old and making some of the best boards of your life, possibly.
Yeah, and just as involved in surfing as ever, too.
Yep.
I really look forward to that, and I'm kind of patient with the whole thing because of that. And, you know, doing, like, when you ask me if I ever plan to make a lot of money out of it, I see people who were on my radar kind of at a similar time when I was learning to shape, that were learning to shape. And it was kind of a time when Instagram was all new and everyone was just like really sharing every moment. And now I see these people running like big board businesses. You know, they get an investor and they're you know, pumping out these huge volume of surfboards. And it's definitely like interesting crossroads, because I think I have designs and concepts that, yes, everyone would like to try one, but like to keep it limited and to keep it, you know, like if you're going to have one, it's going to be because I made it. It's been a really strange choice for me. I think about it a lot, and some of the time it's almost on accident. You know, I had these offers and I was just too busy surfing to like entertain them. But if I got to the point where I sat down and looked at the numbers, I might have went that route, you know?
Yes.
No. And it's just because I wasn't that business savvy. And the first person to tell me like, hey, this, like, you have an interesting business model, like just putting that title to my approach was Nat. And he was really like, so you're going to sell these boards for really expensive and only make what you can make. He goes, that's an interesting business model. And that's like rung in my head. I'm like, wow, he called what I'm doing a business model. And for me, it was just this creative off the wall, fly by your seat approach to making boards. And it's landed me in a very interesting position. Yeah.
No, well, Nat Young has been very entrepreneurial in his entire surfing career. He's so much more than just a great surfer.
Yeah.
Right now we are in Vista. I see chickens in the backyard. You've got your new baby in the room next door with your longtime partner. Tell me about your life these days.
Well, it's been a really grounding experience having a kid, and so much inspiration has come from it. And sort of growing up has happened for me. I bought this place with my wife about 2 years ago. And before this, we were looking at raw land because I wanted to build a house. And I was reading these like super gung-ho hippie books on cob houses and earth bag building and like straw bale construction. And they make it seem like anyone can do it with these materials. But the thing that they don't talk about all that often is time. And so I was gung-ho. I thought I was going to build myself like this marvelous creative mud dome for the first time off the grid and live happily ever after. And reality sets in when you are, you know, doing something that requires manual labor, and then your free time wants to be filled up with this other building project. And so I feel like we dodged a bullet with the raw land situation, and we have this kind of like middle of the road fixer upper house, and I get to like learn it maybe in a reverse sense and kind of do the cosmetic work first and check out the framing and be like, oh, what's that? And it's this kind of like approachable canvas for me to fulfill my building itch.
Yeah.
And so yeah, am a victim of the DIY lifestyle. I definitely like push it far with the house projects and stuff, doing it by myself, and I'm reluctant to hire anyone because I really want to learn it through and through. And I feel like my skill set in the shaping bay has given me this confidence towards approaching other things in life, and also inspirations like Nat, who I mentioned earlier. I was building boards with his son out at their family farm, and it was a house that he built by him, with the help of his friends, but on his own accord when he was 27 years old. And it was a masterpiece, you know, and the thing had that living feel to it. And when we'd stay there, there's just this like presence of him and presence of his dedication to that land. And it's beautiful, It was like one of the most awesome things I've ever got to experience. And so it started the fire with wanting to build something for myself, and that's been my dream for a really long time. And yeah.
Nice. And is surfing at the center of things for you? Or do you still feel like you've got a lot to do in the water?
No, not right now.
Okay.
I'm taking a break.
Yeah.
I still surf a lot. And I think the shift from it, like being your job, I think this year I ended my sponsorship with Volcom, and that was a wild one for me. It was a long time that I got a paycheck for being a surfer, and then all of a sudden I was like, okay, like the money I earned from the boards I'm able to produce, so it's still important for me to go out there and surf, and it makes me super happy. But I've lived in North County for a long time, and like the conditions here aren't that exciting for me most of the time, so it's been a process of just learning how to pick your windows and knowing what I'm still interested in. And I rode a shortboard a lot over the last 3 years just because longboarding was like a pretty social scene. And like I just wasted away so many days surfing 3 times a day. You can really do that all the time, and it hinders your productivity, you know? And so I'm super excited about all these building projects and reading all these like building books and into architecture and just laying out a place. We have dreams of building another unit here on the property, and having a yard is like this new wonderful challenge of just keeping the weeds back and growing avocados and I don't know, just spending time in nature in our little, I call it like a nature terrarium because it's just a small little spot, but it can feel like you're out in nature.
Yep.
So yeah, my focus has definitely shifted, but that being said, like my love for surfing and progressing my surfing and having those challenges, that's like far from over for me. Yeah. It's just a moment of reflection and a moment of grounding myself, and then with plans to kind of take the show back on the road, but in a different fashion with the family, and hopefully, fulfilling a handful of orders when we're off traveling in the down days and being able to spend time at places that I still really like dream of surfing.
Yep. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I like all of it, Ryan.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been awesome. The whole having a house to maintain has given me a lot of drive in the shaping bay too, because, you spend a day hanging drywall on the ceiling and you're super thankful that your work is like hand level in the shaping bay.
Sure.
And you're really thankful for how quickly foam disappears when you sand it. And like all these things just, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger sort of thing. And yeah, all this new like grounding and focus, I think, is helping me in the shaping bay and making me super appreciative of, the time I get to spend being creative and in that flow state.
Yeah. I want to tell you, I'm inspired. Yeah. You seem like your life is very intentional, and I know that's kind of a popular word these days, but you're not wasting time. You seem like you've got everything sort of working together in this great way.
Yeah, I've definitely, I get a lot of inspiration from the things that I surround myself in, and I've been really open to challenges lately, and that goes a long way. You know, just like when things are hard, I'm not like trying to complain too much, and
Yeah.
I don't know, all these things. Like I had all these moments too before my son was born that I kind of had this click, like, oh, I better get some surf travel in. And I got these like intentional trips to kind of gnarly spots that I had always dreamed about. I got to go to Skeleton Bay in Namibia.
Yep.
And that was like a super bucket list thing, but I hadn't done a like strike mission like that in a long time. And it was like pretty uprooting because we were here and we have all these house projects and, you know, like you said, adulting starting to creep. And I was like, I'm going to drop everything. I'm going to go chase these barrels, and then we're going to have our son, and I'm going to just hang out, you know? And I got to do that, and that plays over and over in my mind a lot, you know? Like getting to set out on a voyage like that with the intention that your life is about to change. Some people really, you know, they have to freaking hit it head down and scramble to get their stuff put together. And luckily for us, we were here and we had our project set out in front of us, and it was just a break from it. So I feel really blessed in my situation now, and I'm just super grateful. Yeah, just really lucky to get to do what I love and continue to build my skill set. And yeah, like you said earlier, craftsmanship's a huge focus of mine, and to get all these different outlets to test my skill has been just like the most rewarding challenge ever. Yeah.
Do you feel like this house being sort of somewhat of a fixer-upper and having many projects, do the house projects ever feed into the shaping room? Do you feel like...
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yep.
Also, like the stress going into it. I remember when shaping was a stressful endeavor like that, and it just reminds you to... you know, feed off your experience too, because I'll approach something that I don't know how to do with the house, and I'm like, you know, you're spending all your time thinking about how you're going to do it, whereas an experienced builder would just do it and he'd have it done. And so having the shaping bay being like this time off for my mind has been like an awesome state to enter the shaping bay. Really just, you know, makes the process flow like water.
Yep. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie.
Great chatting.
Yeah.
Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal and is produced by me, Jamie Brisick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Our theme song is Give Me a Wave by Oscar Matsumiya and Paz Lenchantin. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from FCS, Finesse, Howler Brothers, Outerknown, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. The journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses, the badge of the explorer. For over 40 years and counting, Costa has remained steadfast in their dedication to not only crafting the most durable, functional, and long-lasting eyewear, but in protecting our waterways and natural resources. Whether you're on the back deck scanning for yellowtail, eyeing a set swinging wide at an empty point, camped out on a bluff at the end of a rotted two-track, or anywhere and everywhere in between, Costas are built to help you see what's out there. Head over to costadelmar.com today to find just the right pair for you, no matter where the water takes you. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.